For this video, I had to turn off the camera microphone due to all the wind noise, so I'm going to narrate over it. Here I am on a brand new lake, which as you saw at the beginning of this video, took me quite some time to get to traveling down an ATV trail. Being a new lake, which I wasn't able to find any information about online, I wasn't sure how the day was going to go. You have to accept that you may end up getting skunked, you may catch a few fish, or somewhere in between, but really is part of the adventure of fishing a brand new lake. This is literally the first 5 minutes of me fishing, and having a fish bite array was a great sign. As I'm reeling in the fish, I wasn't quite sure what I had on at that point. Once the fish got closer to the canoe, I realized that it was my target species, a walleye, which you'll see here in a moment as I bring the fish into the canoe. And it's always great when you catch a fish within the first 5 minutes and it ends up being the species that you're targeting. As I'm unhooking the fish, you can see that I'm using one of my favorite methods of worm harness. On this day, I was using real worms as I had some extra from a previous trip. There are occasions when I will use artificials such as Gulp Alive and do well. You will notice here that the fish bit the front hook of the worm harness, which is a really good sign, indicating that they were aggressive. Other times you'll find walleyes will be very lethargic and they'll only bite the rear hook, which can make for very tough fishing. In my zone, the regulations for a sport license allow you to keep 4 walleye, with not more than one being greater than 18.1 inches or 46 centimeters. I do really enjoy eating freshly caught walleye, and there's no fresher fish than this. I put the walleye on a stringer to take home for dinner. And so here we have my first 5 minutes of fishing and my first fish of the day, an either size walleye, a great start so far. Next, I decide to use the wind to my advantage and do a slow drift along the shoreline, using another one of my favorite walleye techniques, which is either to jig or slowly troll a rattle bait. Here I'm using a Rapella Rip and Wrap chartreuse color. I've had fantastic success catching many fish using this technique. As you probably saw there in the background, there was a small bass jumping. That fish probably hit my lure within 2 seconds of it hitting the water. Now, although I wasn't specifically targeting smallmouth bass for this trip, they are a lot of fun to catch. And as most anglers would say, they are pound for pound the strongest fighting freshwater fish out there, and I would agree with that. As you can probably tell by the bend in my rod, this fish is giving me a really good fight. I am using a medium action rod, which is pretty stiff. I would actually classify it probably closer to a medium heavy. And now one thing I was kind of surprised at, just because the fish did jump a couple times there, was that I was able to land this bass. They are notorious for being able to spit hooks when they jump. And fortunately enough for me, I was able to land the fish, which is good. And an important tip here that I can speak to from personal experience is that when you're trying to unhook the fish from the lure, be very, very careful and try not to get a hook or hooks in your hand. Trust me, it's not a lot of fun. Not the biggest bass I've ever caught, but quick release, a lot of fun, good fight. As you can tell by the fact that I'm now wearing a toque instead of a baseball hat, is that the temperature has dropped. And I've gone back to trolling the worm harness. And I've just hooked into a small little bass again. Not a giant bass, but they sure do like to fight. It's always a lot of fun when you do hook into one. You can see the bend in my ugly stick there. This lake definitely had a good population of smallmouth bass, pike, and even a decent amount of walleye. There you go, put them back in the lake. Quick release, back to fishing. Now it is the afternoon, and things have warmed up a little bit. I've gone from wearing the toque back to the baseball hat. I have put on my rain jacket though, just as an extra layer of insulation, and I've gone back to trolling the rip and wrap. And what I like to do here while I'm trolling it is every few seconds give a slow pop, maybe a foot or two. I never actually let the lure hit the bottom, but very close. And oftentimes what I find will happen is you'll be slowly going, and then you'll go to lift up, and then you got to fish. Which is exactly what happened here. Went to lift up, and now I have a fish on my line. And at this point, I wasn't quite sure what I had, just because I had been catching walleye, pike, and bass all in this kind of same shoreline area. And it did end up being a walleye, and fighting pretty good too, as you can tell by the bend in the rod. At this point, I already had 2 walleye on my stringer. Unfortunately, I had my camera off when I did catch the second fish. And now realizing that I already had the 2 fish, which was more than enough for me, I decided with this third walleye that I was just going to put it back. Quick pose for the camera, and then back into the lake.